Good afternoon, everyone. This is Megan Glass from OPWDD. Today, we will focus our discussion on enrollment and enrollment termination, processes and notifications for care coordination organizations, presented by Allison McCarthy from the Division of Person-Centered Supports. This will be our 19th information session. All of the sessions 1 through 18 are posted on the OPWDD website, and they're available for viewing and also for registration for future sessions at the link provided on your screen. Now, without further ado, Allison McCarthy will begin our presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today's goal is to provide a description of the process and role of the care coordination organization in the responsibilities for following transactions that include CCO enrollment and CCO enrollment termination. So when we talk about termination from a CCO enrollment, there are two types that include disenrollment and voluntary withdrawals. So similar to the way MSC has worked in the past, there are two different types of disenrollment. I just want to note that this presentation is based on the CCO notice of determination and enrollment termination flow document that was shared with CCO several weeks ago. That document is a Word document that describes the same process, and this presentation is to just break it down a bit for care managers and for CCOs, and to really provide a format that allows you to think a little bit more detailed about the process. And really, as you move through your day, as you move through implementation, we encourage you to direct your questions and feedback to your CCO leadership. The CCO is responsible for its own policies and procedures that comply with this overarching policy, and they really will be the entity that's directing their staff to implement and ensure that these processes are completed and complied with as we move forward, recognizing that, implementation is ongoing. So today, we may not have everything perfectly in place, but as we move forward, again, we encourage you to direct your questions to your leadership. Your leadership should be directing its questions to OPWDD's implementation group so that we can provide clarity and confirm understanding and work together collectively to really make this process work. Just want to mention, again, just like at MSC, prior to July 1st, we have a process for enrollment and disenrollment, and it really is to ensure that individuals are informed of their enrollment and disenrollment and really understand their rights to fair hearing. So as you are aware, it's very important that individuals and families have an understanding of what their rights are when they choose to enroll and choose to disenroll in a program. So we'll continue with our presentation. Just want to mention that this process that we're talking about here happens following the process of eligibility. So the eligibility and level of care eligibility determination process is conducted at the DDRO front door, and that will occur first before someone is enrolled into the CCO organization. So we don't want to confuse things. We want to bifurcate that process and make sure folks are clear. So CCO responsibilities. CCOs are responsible for having a clear and focused training on Medicaid notice requirements with their care managers. CCOs and their care managers must monitor eligibility via the CCO roster that is available to you. CCOs are also responsible for continuing to stay in touch with the DDROs, collaborating with the DDROs on the noticing process. We are actually today looking at ways to streamline and really leverage the information technology that exists within the CCO system so that this can be a less burdensome process for CCOs, and more to come on that. CCOs are also expected to send a copy of the CCO notice of determination to the enrollee and or their family representative, assist the DDRO when a fair hearing has been requested, and comply with the decision after the fair hearing has been determined. So what this slide really demonstrates is the health home care management enrollment process. So again, I just want to bifurcate. Here we're talking about health home services versus the basic HCBS plan support. There are two services and there are two processes, and I can talk about that in a little bit more detail, but right now we'll focus on health home care management enrollment. Individuals who are eligible and choose to enroll in the health home care management service are required to complete and sign the appropriate consent form. So as you guys are aware, there is the requirement to complete the consent forms. There's a different form for adults and different form for children, and that is the first step of enrollment. Once that occurs, the CCO enters an enrollment transaction into choices using the CCO1, and TABS validates the individual's eligibility. Once the CCO verifies enrollment into the program code via choices, the CCO generates a notice of determination for enrollment in the New York State Health Home Program enrollment notice, also known as the DOH 5234. So just like we have DOH consent forms, we have DOH notice for enrollment and notice for disenrollment when we talk about the health home service. That 5234 needs to be sent by the CCO to the individual parent, legal guardian, representative, and uploads that document to choices. So again, when an individual enrolls, the welcome letter is sent with to the individual with that DOH 5234. Now the 5234, I believe, is included in the CCO system, so that should be a pretty streamlined process for the CCO. And again, in terms of communicating with the DDRO, we're working to look at ways to streamline that so we don't have to provide separate emails and separate letters or communication to the DDRO. So we're discussing internally how to streamline this and take advantage of the systems that are available through the CCO model. So let's turn to basic home and community-based plan support enrollment. There is a consent, as you are aware, that an individual must sign to enroll in that program. Once an individual signs that consent, the CCO then enters the enrollment into choices using CCO1 screen. They will send a written notice of determination to the individual along with the welcome letter. But you do not need, the care manager or the CCO does not need to verify enrollment or generate that DOH notice or upload it to choices or send it to the individual parent, legal guardian, or representative. Let's turn to disenrollment. Reasons for disenrollment. Here on this page, we talk about 6 reasons for disenrollment. The person is no longer enrolled in Medicaid, no longer residing in an appropriate setting, enrolled in another comprehensive care management program, no longer residing in New York State, no longer developmental disability eligible or no longer meeting level of care, or lastly, the individual has passed away. So let's take the first type of disenrollment. These are for individuals who are no longer enrolled in Medicaid, live in a non-qualified setting, or are enrolled in another care management program, or no longer lives in New York State. The process for disenrollment regarding individuals who are no longer eligible in the Medicaid or for any of these reasons listed on this screen is the CCO enters a disenrollment transaction into choices. The CCO then generates the DOH 5235 form and uploads it to choices. And I know we're kind of getting, we're talking about uploading the form to choices, but I just want to highlight that's an area we're looking into a little bit further, because we do understand that that might be a big lift for every enrollment or disenrollment that occurs. So again, the CCO generates the DOH 5235 and sends it to the individual, family, and representative. Here's the second reason for a disenrollment: for an individual who no longer meets level of care criteria or is no longer DD eligible. If this occurs, the CCO enters the disenrollment into choices. The disenrollment is placed in the choices queue. So if this is the case where you're no longer meeting eligibility, we would like the DDRO must confirm the individual's disenrollment. So the DDRO will continue that process, and the CCO monitors choices for disenrollment confirmation. Once the disenrollment is confirmed, the CCO may generate the DOH 5235 disenrollment notice. Again, that disenrollment notice is sent to the individual parent, legal guardian, or representative. And lastly, for disenrollment reasons, for an individual who is deceased, the disenrollment is entered into choices. The CCO must not generate or send a DOH 5235 to the termination is effective the date of the death. The date of death on the CCO2 only disenrolls the person from the CCO program code. CCOs will need to notify the DDRO so that districts can disenroll the person from other programs. So it's important to note that anytime an individual has, passed away, it's important to notify the DDRO, because the DDRO system is what is the system that determines whether somebody can have other services authorized, and we want that to be reflected in the system as soon as possible. So turning back to the HCBS plan support disenrollment, the DDRO, not the CCO, verifies disenrollment, generates the NOD, and uploads it to choices for the CCO monitoring, and sends it to the individual parent, legal guardian, or representative. So if we think about the way the world used to work in MSD, when the DDRO sent the notice, that's how the basic plan support works. Whereas on the health home service side, it is now the CCO who is sending the notices. So now we're going to turn to voluntary withdrawal. This occurs when an individual continues to meet the criteria for enrollment in the health home care management service or basic HCBS plan support, but chooses to withdraw from that service. There are 3 reasons for voluntary withdrawal. The first is a person decides to transfer to another CCO. The second, the individual is transferring from the CCO's health home care management program to the basic HCBS plan support program. And lastly, an individual withdraws from enrollment in the CCO health home care management service entirely. So if an individual transfers to another CCO, the care manager must provide the new CCO with the following documents and upload these documents to choices. These documents include the current ISP or life plan, developmental disabilities profiles 2 or coordinated assessment system, so the DDP2 or the CAS, the initial level of care eligibility determination and most current LCD, and any other related documentation that's important for the new CCO to have. So again, we're talking about transferring to another CCO. On the screen, we have the list of documents that I just reviewed that need to be passed from the original CCO to the new CCO. The CCO will then enter disenrollment transaction into choices. the care manager coordinates with the new CCO during this transition period. So you're working hand in hand together with the former CCO and the new CCO to ensure that those documents are pushed to the new CCO. CCO will follow the enrollment process once that documentation and the disenrollment occurs with the former CCO. So for transferring from health home care management to basic HCBS plan support within the same CCO, the individual transfers from the health home to the basic. Individuals who voluntarily withdraw from the health home program and enroll in the basic HCBS plan support program within their current CCO must sign the appropriate health home withdrawal form described above or on this slide, and then must sign the care coordination organization consent for participation in basic home and community-based plan support form. Then the CCO enters the disenrollment transaction into choices. So from transferring from basic HCBS plan support to health home care management within the same CCO, the individual must sign a withdrawal form from the basic HCBS plan support form and sign one of the two consents to enroll and share information form depending on whether they're 18 years and older or underage. So as you know, we have the DOH consent forms, one for adults and one for children, that must be completed. So next we'll turn to voluntary withdrawals from care management services. The care manager must have the individual sign the health home consent withdrawal, the DOH 5058. Individuals enrolled in the HCBS waiver who voluntarily withdraw from care management services, either the health home or basic HCBS plan support, must be informed by their care manager that eligibility for waiver services will end if they are not enrolled in a care management service. So as you know, today, an individual, in order to continue waiver enrollment, must be receiving and enrolled in a care management program. So for this case, we do have a process where the DDRO will review whether an individual, to make sure they understand that their choice means that they would then be choosing to disenroll from the HCBS waiver. So this is a flow describing that process. The individual voluntarily withdraws and does not select another CCO or care management program. The CCO would enter the voluntary withdrawal form into choices. The withdrawal would go into the choices queue. At that time, the DDRO must confirm the individual's voluntary withdrawal. The CCO, again, monitors choices for the voluntary withdrawal confirmation, and if confirmed, the CCO generates the DOH 5058 or 5202 voluntary withdrawal notice. So these, again, are the DOH withdrawal forms that must be completed. CCO then sends the notice to the individual parent and legal guardian. So that was a lot of flows and information. Again, there are the two types of services, two types of disenrollment. One is based on eligibility. The other is based on voluntary withdrawal. The processes vary a bit, but again, when somebody's eligibility is a reason for disenrollment, the DDRO will confirm that prior to the CCO disenrolling. And again, before someone voluntarily withdraws and does not choose another program, again, the DDRO will be confirming that because we want to ensure continuity of care and that individuals understand their choice before they are removed from the program entirely. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. We have a lot of experts in the room who are available to answer your questions.
All right, so we have gotten a few questions. The first, is there a lapse of service when there is a transfer between CCOs?
No, there should not be a lapse in service when an individual transfers. The time at which the person disenrolls, the current CCO continues to provide that service. And then, as you know, the first of the following month is the date at which the new CCO or that enrollment would be effective.
Could you please re-explain the process for the HCBS or the basic HCBS plan support withdrawal? Is there a form that has been distributed because it's not DOH?
This is Angie. For basic HCBS plan support, care managers will go into choices and use the CCO2 withdrawal form. That will cover withdrawal or disenrollment for both health home care management and basic HCBS plan support services.
And could you please re-review the criteria for the documents for a voluntary withdrawal to another CCO?
Sure.
And is there a form that the individual has to sign? And what if they don't sign?
So voluntary, can't find it here.
Slide 16.
So when you're transferring to another CCO, the care manager of the existing CCO is responsible for pushing the following documents to the new CCO: the current ISP or life plan, whichever is available, the DDP-2 or the CAS, the initial level of care eligibility determination and the most current LCED, and any other documents that will be helpful for the new CCO to then begin care managing for the individual. So how this works in the system is that the CCO will complete the CCO2 to disenroll the individual, and then the new CCO would complete the enrollment process.
And are these same documents required for individuals that are not transferring to another CCO?
So if an individual is not transferring to another CCO, but they're choosing a different care management service, so they were in health home and now they're moving to basic, the CCO will continue to retain and have those services available, work with your CCO administration to better understand how that works within your CCO, but I believe it's within your system, and it would basically just, you know, move from an individual that was reflected to be receiving health home to then an individual who's receiving HCBS basic plan support.
And if this is Kate Bishop, if there's someone who's just withdrawing altogether voluntarily because they no longer want services and they have no plans for re-enrollment either through a basic or health home service, they would just use the withdrawal COH form and complete it as Allison described, but they wouldn't need to pick up a new provider of coordination services if they're opting out of services altogether. I wasn't sure if that might be what the question was asking.
Right, and just to reiterate, there are those voluntary withdrawal forms that are required, and they reflect the DOH forms that exist today for the primary health home program as well, and those are available on the DOH website, and I believe are also integrated into the CCO's IT system for use.
And this is Angie, that is a situation in which the DDRO would complete their verification process to ensure that the individual understands that if they're connected to waiver services, that those services will need to be terminated, and to review if there's any health and safeguard issues that need to be covered to ensure that removal from all care management is appropriate and safe for the individual. And once the DDRO completes their verification, they will let you, the CCO, know that that's completed and that the person can indeed be withdrawn and the notice of termination can be issued.
When an individual transfers from one CCO to another, is a consent form required to upload the required documents into Choices so the new CCO can access them?
So it would work the same way, just like a new enrollment. So if an individual is receiving care management services from CCO A and wants to transfer to CCO 2 or B, the CCO A will need to complete the withdrawal form. They'll need to communicate with the new CCO to align those dates, and the individual will need to complete the appropriate consent forms to receive care management services from CCO B, who would then upload them and complete the steps and choices so that those program codes can be reflected and they can access the individual's choices record.
Can a CCO disenroll a person that refuses to contact or meet with a care manager?
So we do understand that there are times where care managers may lose contact with an individual, or maybe the individual is choosing not to engage with the CCO or care manager. And every effort, just like it's the same as it was with Medicaid service coordination, every effort must be made to make contact with the individual. If after a period of time there has been no contact whatsoever, you can work with your regional office to follow the necessary steps to withdraw that individual from care management services. The DDROs do have a process that they will be able to share with you, but you will need to supply documentation such as care management notes that reflect all of the dates and the efforts and attempts to make contact before a withdrawal can be made. Legally, we cannot just withdraw people from care management, after not, answering a phone call or two. So we need to demonstrate all attempts.
Does this process that we discussed today apply to individuals prior to transferring during the 7-1 transition, or is this for new individuals moving forward?
So for individuals who transitioned, they were required to complete consent forms. I believe the CCO has the notice of enrollment documentation within the system to then make that available, if requested, to the individual. But in correspondence prior to this, we did indicate it was not necessary to mail it. So certainly for people who have enrolled since July 1, all of this applies. And, anyone who would disenroll would, regardless of whether they're new or transitioning, would need to have the same process followed. But again, for the people who transitioned, that initial notice of enrollment was, recognized as not necessary to mail, but to share and have it available upon request of the individual.
How long should it take for the CCO1 form to be approved when someone wants to enroll from basic to health home services?
So the CCO1 is the CCO's enrollment process. If the individual is eligible per the system, meets all of the requirements of enrollment, that enrollment becomes effective the month following, the first of the month following. So it's really a matter of once the CCO1 is completed, the system will verify that, and the CCO will be able to view their roster to confirm that that enrollment has been accepted or pended or, not accepted.
So if an individual is receiving waiver services, but the family would like to change CCOs, Who is responsible for submitting this request to transfer to a different CCO?
The individual and family would talk to their care manager about that choice, and the care manager would support them in processing that decision and choice.
If an individual voluntarily disenrolls, is there a time period which they can re-enroll without having to go through the front door eligibility process again?
This is Angie. So it would depend on a case by case, and it would have to be looked at. So, for example, if the level of care, had to be reviewed during this time period, those things would have to be redone and looked at. If it was only a week and there was no lapse in service, that would be a different situation, but it would really be a case by case and is not a blanket answer.
If a person voluntarily withdraws from the CCO, will they automatically be removed from OPWDD services?
That's a good question. The individual, if they voluntarily enroll to withdraw, and it's been confirmed that by the DDRO that the individual has made this choice, then a notice of disenrollment in the waiver would be issued as well, and at that time they would have another opportunity to confirm that the individual does not want to receive waiver services. The individual is welcome to request other services outside the waiver if that's the desire of the individual and family.
How does the care manager proceed when they aren't able to reach a person for visits or plan reviews? Should they be disenrolled?
I think Angie had already discussed this question a bit.
If they're unable to make contact.
Again, unable to make contact, we expect that several attempts be made and documented before a person is then disenrolled. And I don't know if you want to.
And there's not a set time period for the length of time that, it's not just if you try for 3 months to contact somebody. You need to demonstrate due diligence in every effort to make contact with individuals. We understand that individuals may not notify care managers if they go out of town or go on vacation for an extended period of time. So you have to demonstrate due diligence. The regional office will ask you for documentation. The regional office must review it, and they will determine if you have sufficiently tried to make contact. If not, they're going to return it and tell you to continue to try to make contact. If they feel that you have, then the regional office, they will then also take their steps to make contact with the individual. And then the regional office is the one who ultimately decides if the individual is going to be withdrawn through their verification process. Once that verification process is completed, the DDRO will let the care manager know if they have approved the withdrawal or if they've denied it, and then what the next steps are.
If a care manager doesn't have access to choices, how would they be able to enroll someone into a CCO and also obtain access to choices for the future?
So CCO, or the CCO access to choices, is a process that has been explained by the implementation team in various correspondence. Your CCO administration should be able to provide that information to basically support your use and access to choices. At this time, if you do not have access and you're a care manager and your administration has communicated that you need to have access, then proceed by contacting your CCO administrator. Okay, so that concludes the questions that we received from the audience. We thank you for participating today. Again, we appreciate your participation and support. We'll continue to provide additional information as it becomes available. I encourage you to reach out to your CCO administrators to direct your questions so they can then direct them to our implementation team so we can have a streamlined process for communicating and sharing information on a consistent basis. So we're all operating with the same information, and we can ensure that we support individuals and the enrollment and disenrollment into CCOs in a expeditious way. So again, thank you, and we appreciate your participation.
Also, within the coming days, a recording and a copy of the PowerPoint will be posted to the OPWDD website.